Group, Mary Kelleher, please come on up.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. This is one of my favorite groups. My name is Mary Kelleher, and I'm running for the TRWD Regional Water District. I served on the board from 2013 to 2017, and it was a little on the controversial side, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to tell you what prompted me to actually get involved in politics in the water district. My husband and I have 12 acres on the east side of Fort Worth, and we farm. And that area has been farmed forever. And we're in the Trinity River bottom, so we expected to get floods. They were very manageable. The water came in pretty slowly and receded quickly, so there was no real problem. But in 2010, the water came in so fast that within 15 minutes, my backyard was the Trinity River. And my husband and I were swimming in it. It was, anyone who's ever been a victim of flooding, it's traumatic. I had to swim through the Trinity River water. Fire ants just were clinging to my husband and I's body, stinging us, stuff swirling between our legs. We didn't know what on earth was. Our sheep were drowning, and we had to make decisions on which sheep we could save. I still have nightmares to this day of seeing the sheep go under and not coming back up. So that was bad. My husband and I, we lost all kinds of farm equipment and livestock. But the worst thing was we stayed underwater until the water evaporated for about 180 days, I guess. We had dead animals floating in our yard. I couldn't get anybody to help, nobody. And come to find out, what had happened was the water district, who controls the discharge of the water around the lakes, had discharged water and affected the levels of the river and let the river get out of its banks. So it was then that I started contacting TRWD, and I was told that they had no standing in that, it wasn't their fault. So I started fighting back. I knew nothing about politics, but I started going to Fort Worth City Council, where I had a whopping 3 minutes at the end of City Council to kind of express myself. And I started getting a little bit of news coverage, and the flooding is just, it happened 2 more times in 2012, and then 2 more times in 2015. And every single time I came down with a horrible case of E. coli. So it was just a very traumatic experience. So in 2013, I was contacted by a friend. My friend led Caraway, who was a flooding victim in Haltom City, where a little girl ended up drowning. And she called and she asked me if I was interested in running for the Kelleher Regional Water District. So without even thinking, I didn't even talk to my husband, I said, yes, I'll do it. So I ran as part of a slate, and I was the only one to get into, I was elected, which if anyone had ever told me I was going to be involved in politics, I would have said you're crazy. So my experience on the board, my very first, well, actually I want to share with you what happened to me as I was driving to the water district that day. I was so nervous because I didn't know what to expect. I knew I wasn't wanted because I was kind of outspoken, and as I was pulling into the driveway in Northside Drive, the theme from Rocky came on. And I thought to myself, thank you, Jesus, I think everything's going to be okay. So I managed to get through my first meeting, and I made some record requests, and the general manager pulled me in after the meeting. His face was all red. He said, I need to set some ground rules for you. And I thought, oh, here we go. I think I said something to him about already having a daddy or something. It wasn't very pleasant. I wasn't, as an elected official, I wasn't allowed to have records. I had to actually get an attorney to get records as an elected official. It was really an emotional roller coaster. Some of the other board members would laugh at me because I had never been on a board before, so I had to learn how to do all that. And they changed the rules on me when I got there. It used to take just one director, one board member could put in an item on an agenda, future agenda, but they changed it to two, so because they knew I would never get a second. So that was awkward too. I noticed when I started going to meetings that some of the directors had a key, like a Chubb card, and they would actually come in the building and then go to another part of the building using that Chubb card. So I asked if I could have one too, and the general manager said, oh no. So I couldn't even get a key. So if the restroom was occupied, I had to be escorted through certain parts of that building just to use the restroom, which really made me wonder what's going on there that they're so secretive. They hired an attorney at the taxpayer's expense to keep me out of executive session, but I refused to get out of my seat, so they had to cancel executive session that day. I was censured. I was censured for speaking out at Fort Worth City Council about the watering restrictions for the citizens of Fort Worth, because the water district had sent a very horrible idle threat to the city council, wanting them to follow a certain method of watering. I did end up, from this group, I was given this badge of honor after being censured that says duty, courage, honor, censure. So, still, for that I will. Despite being typically 4-1 on everything, I was able to get some things done. I kind of had to shame the other board members into it, but whatever it takes, we've got some good things done. Meetings are now live streamed. They're held at 9 o'clock in the morning when most people are working, so you can't see what's going on. But now they're live streamed, so people can watch from work or later on in the day. After the E. coli situation, I thought about all those people that were tubing in Trinity, and I asked about the water testing, and I was told that the water was tested monthly. So I asked that water be tested in the recreational areas at least once a week, and now they're tested once a week, and it's posted online so people can make an educated decision on whether or not they want to get in the river. When I started on the board, it was a time when we had a lot of earthquakes, and I was worried about our dams, because you could only imagine what would happen if an earthquake compromised one of the dams. So I asked for more seismology equipment, and we got that, so that was good. One of my favorite ones was, I noticed there were a lot of people at the water district that had the same last name. Good. And contracts were being reviewed. Again, I saw a lot of the same names. So I asked for the ethics policy, and I was told by the general manager that there wasn't one, that there was only one for the board. Well, somebody mailed it to me anonymously, so I was able to get a copy of the ethics policy, which was pretty strong until you came to the end. There was one sentence at the end that said, exceptions can be made by the general manager and assistant general manager at any time. So I thought, why bother having an ethics policy if the general manager and assistant can make changes? And they do have a lot of family members that work there and still do. For example, Jim Oliver is the general manager. His son is Matt Oliver, and he's the spokesperson for the Trinity River Vision Project, the Panther Island Project. He also has another nephew that works there, and his sister-in-law worked there too, but she left after I got on the board because I started asking questions. An exciting thing that I got done without, I've kind of turned into a water nerd over the years. So I'm very excited about one thing that that I was able to get done. It was that one of the engineers at the TRWD's dream to have what's called aquifer storage recovery. And I don't know how familiar y'all are with it, but basically, all these aquifers that we have, everybody has straws in them, sucking the water out, but nobody puts water back in. So that's a big, big problem. So what aquifer storage is basically a well, and it holds water, millions, billions of gallons of water underground that doesn't evaporate and can be pulled out for use immediately. I don't know how much y'all know about the water district, but most of our water is treated here locally and then sent down the river, down to East Texas, where it's stored in 2 reservoirs, and then they pump that water back up to us when we need it. So a lot of our water costs, the biggest expense is electricity, pump it uphill. So my thought was, why don't we store it locally instead of sending it downstream? For example, Village Creek Water Treatment, they treat 1.5 million gallons a day and send it down the river. And that could be easily stored here for any emergencies we have. Oh, yeah.
Perfect. There we go. All right, so I think next up we are going to play a short video, and then we have some additional guests that we're going to bring up. Mary has a lot more content to kind of share with you about her experiences there, why this is important. But give us a second, we'll play this video and then invite some folks up. Fair enough? Perfect. Yep, the lights in the back, perfect.
In 2003, the draft plan for the TRWD Uptown project was put together, and in 2004, it was presented to the council.
The question comes up is who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be the taxpayers, or is it going to be the developers who benefit from it? And that kind of gets to the heart of the question. Not only who's going to pay for it, but how.
The TRWD River Vision is an extraordinary project, but it is something that should not be funded by the taxpayer. The economic development such as this should be done in the private sector.
In closed-door meetings where these things are approved, they're funded for, and the common citizen doesn't know. They have no idea what's going on besides, hey, there's going to be a river walk in Fort Worth. That's all they know. They don't know anything that goes behind it.
I don't want to be San Antonio. I don't want to be Austin. I think Fort Worth is pretty great as it is.
In moving northbound over the river, that will draw away from the downtown area. We have great downtown, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and dilute the benefits that have already come from a strong downtown development.
Today we use the word earmarks, and that's kind of a dirty word. That's how it was put into that project. It was tacked onto a bill. It didn't get vetting through committees. And so what you had is a congressman, as a point of personal privilege, stuck this thing into a bill that wasn't necessarily debated by Congress. But the initial bill only permitted a project not to exceed $220 million, with the federal component not more than $110 million. That has not changed. And so even though the money hasn't been, even the $110 million hasn't been appropriated, we're now looking at a project that's approaching $1 billion, probably will grow to more than that over time. And so what you have is a project that was authorized at not to exceed $220 million, that's now 5 times that. And the federal component that was authorized has never been appropriated, other than small amounts that are snuck in for bridges and studies and a few things like that. In this TRWD River Vision project, the developers want the citizens to pay for the cost of development, so all they have to do is put the buildings up and make some money.
I think one of the problems is that you can't take a
Put $8 billion into a river so that the developers can benefit from that. To me, it is like parents, irresponsible parents, that will buy ice parties, but the difference is a swimming pool or improve the streets doesn't have a plaque with somebody's name on it. The river's going to have somebody's name attached to being, this council was responsible for that.
The citizens who care had a very enlightened alternative to this project. Would have cost about $47 million when it was first conceived. No doubt that would be more now as well. But something of that, a poorly managed, underfunded project. The one stroke of genius, I would say, intelligent planning was that it was put under the auspices of the Tarrant Regional Water District, which has the responsibility for flood control and providing water to the city of Fort Worth and some surrounding, actually a lot of surrounding areas, they provide raw water. A lot of that water is provided or resold through Fort Worth to surrounding cities. But the actual taxing area of the Tarrant Regional Water District is fairly small and limited to Tarrant County, although their services extend over about a 13 to 16
aging river that went down the street. And a lot of water hit a lot of houses. There were 60 houses, according to the newspaper, that had flooded. There was a condominium group. I live about 600 yards from that condo group. They're on the other side of the creek. And it wiped them out. That probably will not be rebuilt. I don't know what they're going to do. But most of the houses are one story. And the ones that are closest to the creek, yes, those people I am very concerned about. We could have had a death very easily if that had come in at night instead of in the early morning hours. That we would be able to build a channel and pull water away from the creek in the very beginning of the flood, pull it away, put it into a very large pond area or a waterway that's been built that takes that water all the way to the Trinity River. And it wouldn't be moving it more rapidly to the Trinity River. It would actually start to flow earlier to the Trinity River. That's the whole idea. So if we could remove a lot of water during the early flooding stages, we feel that that wouldn't be backing up and hurting a lot of our homes. That's what's been going on. And they should move on it immediately. Or we're going to see the same thing that happened over here at Fossil Creek, and that does worry me a lot. We've had a lot of building that's going on upstream all the way through to Mansfield, and when you put that type of concrete in, most of the water then has to flow into something, into a trough of some type, and that turns
The domain. If you're looking at historically at the use of eminent domain, it's been used to build highways, schools, hospitals, things that the public can use in general. It's a multi-purpose facilities, courthouses that everyone has the ability to use. With the Trinity River Vision, we're seeing private property development coming in. We're going to see high-rise towers. We're going to see things that benefit special interest, and it's not going to be freely usable to all individuals. And this is being built on the back of the local individual and the local taxpayers, and I don't believe that is right.
As a property owner in the area that's been designated for acquisition for the Trinity Uptown portion of Trinity River Vision, you have no idea how insidious that is and how horrible it is.
These courthouses that everyone has the ability to use. With the Trinity River Vision, we're seeing private property development coming in. We're going to see high-rise towers. We're going to see things that benefit special interest, and it's not going to be freely usable to all individuals. And this is being built on the back of the local individual and the local taxpayers, and I don't believe that is right.
As a property owner in the area that's been designated for acquisition for the Trinity Uptown portion of Trinity River Vision, you have no idea how insidious that is and how horrible it feels. All the plans we've made seem to be in direct conflict to all the plans that they had made. We were told 7 years ago that we'd be acquired, so we can only sell to them. Constantly worry about whether it's worthwhile to invest in any maintenance to the building or upkeep. A lot of property owners got together when this first happened, and we started a property owners group, and through the evolution of that group, we formed Citizens Who Care, where we actually read the EIS, studied the project, and offered what we thought was a very positive to invest in any maintenance to the building or upkeep. A lot of property owners got together when this first happened, and we started a property owners group, and through the evolution of that group, we formed Citizens Who Care, where we actually read the EIS, studied the project, and all.
All right, so feedback, awesome. So we wanted to play a little bit of that video. There's actually a much longer video that ties into what we're going to be talking about today, but we wanted to play a few clips. Excuse me. No? All right. There we go. A little bit better. Volume was off. So we're going to bring up a few guests. Some you'll recognize from the video, and then kind of have a discussion. I think that's fair enough. Mary, come on back up. Clyde picked. Click. There we go. Come on up. Perfect. Come on up, Clyde. Gary. Wonderful. Thanks for coming up, Gary. Oh, no, it's the yes. Yep. I'll sit this one. Grab another slot there. Perfect. We saw you in the video. You're famous. Can you give us a little bit of background about who you are, why this was important to you, why you were featured on the video?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is a very important project because it is draining the taxpayers' money from the things that we really ought to be spending money on. And when I ran for city council, it wasn't because I wanted a lot of the free meals and entertainment and trips to Europe for sister cities. It was because I wanted to look out for the interests of the city. And when this project came along, I have to admit I liked it at first because it was a $360 million investment for a $1 billion increase in our tax base. Well, now it's over $1 billion in cost for a $1 billion tax base. That's not a profitable economic program when you're paying as much as you're getting back. I mean, this is taking over, I don't know how many years it'll take to even get it done, but if you read the business press this morning, they are talking about the water district trying to borrow money or get money from the bonds already. The city didn't want to sell those bonds. They were not wanting to guarantee them with the TIF money until the review of the management and the process of going through this pre-revision deal was completed. There was supposed to be a study on it, and right now the general manager of the water district, Jim Oliver, he was quoted in the business press as saying, well, we're going to try and reduce the scope of the project, or the scope of the review, and get the costs down. Well, maybe we should just take his word for it, that everything's all right, because we've been doing that now for 12 years, and that's why we're in such a bad state of affairs. This thing, I knew this was out of hand in 2005, believe it or not. It looked to me, that's why I voted against the TIF. The TIF came up for a vote in 2005 to pay for this, and if you're all familiar with the TIF, a TIF takes increased value, taxes on the increased value of property, and it stays within that TIF district to spend on whatever the TIF board votes to spend it on. It should be money that would go into the general revenue coffers if it was just taxed like your property is at home and where you live and normal businesses. But this deal is is taking money that would normally go into the general revenue and funneling it back into the Trinity River Vision Development Project. So it's, and they're talking about extending the length of the TIF to 50 years. Well, good grief, you know, we'll all be dead in 50 years. And so we'll never see the results of this, and frankly, it's like buying a car and having an upside down loan. We're paying more than the thing is worth to begin with. So I think that voters should be responsible enough to reject this and get after their council members. And this is a city project, remember, it's not a water district project, it's a city project, it's a city development project. City of Fort Worth voted on it, City of Fort Worth is funding it, and the City of Fort Worth taxpayers are paying for it all. Well, I shouldn't say all of it, because a lot of the federal money will be paid for by people all over, but the bulk of the money is going to come out of the pocket of Fort Worth taxpayers. And we need new management at the water district to get good management in the Trinity River Vision Authority, because you wouldn't hire a surgeon to take care of your legal affairs anymore than you would hire a lawyer to take care of your building affairs, I mean, the building development. But that's what they've done. We have a lawyer who is in charge of this thing, Kay Granger's son, and that was a purely political move just to keep the money flowing from Congress. And that's back when the earmarks were still around and they could use earmarks to help fund it. But then they did away with the earmarks, and now Kay Granger is actually in a bind because she can't get the money for the project. And without the federal money, this thing is going nowhere.
I put up a picture of it. Fantastic, yeah, that's a lot of great insight. I put up a picture of this fancy bridge that has been an eyesore for how many years now? I mean, is that not emblematic of the project itself, I think?
Well, yeah, it is, because this, in the first place, this isn't the original design of the bridges. They were designed by Bing Tom, an urban planner from Oregon, who helped design this whole project. And he had a different design for bridges, but we paid $1 million to the water district to build to Bing Tom and his associates actually, to build a replica of the channel that they were going to dig, that they are planning on digging. And they found, I believe, that there was too much water going through that channel, so they had to widen the channel. When they widened the channel, then the bridges didn't work. The TxDOT wanted to build bridges like the 7th Street, West 7th Street bridge that they put in. But the water district and the Trinity River Vision Authority didn't want to do that. J.D. Granger didn't want to do that. So they designed these bridges, which were ill-designed in the first deal because they weren't structurally capable of holding up the road. So they had to redesign them, and that's been increasing the time that it takes to build them and also the cost. We voted on $26.5 million to build those bridges from bond money. And that's the only bond money that we've ever voted on. That's what the public has voted for. And they're stuck with $1 billion price tag. Did you have a question?
Yes. I'm not a businessman, but I am a person who's had to deal with finances in my own home. But what I'm asking is, why can't the district swallow its pride and just drop any money, stop the project until they can figure out a way to fix it? Because right now, what it sounds like it's doing, you've got a bunch of silly-ass clowns who are doing the designing, who are doing the building, and all they're doing is taking my money. And I feel that is robbery, because we put you guys in office to do this sort of stuff, and it looks like to me that I could do just as well hiring some elementary school kids to do the job. And I am getting really, really, really pissed off. Thank you.
Would either of you like to respond to that?
Just for a point of, sorry. Over 200 people's property have been taken by eminent domain for this project, just so you know that, first of all. Another thing is the propositions that have been passed, we've all been kind of hoodwinked. This most recent one was for $250 million, but what did it say it was for? It said flood control and drainage improvements. Well, if you read the fine print, it was for Panther Island. So most people in Fort Worth, we have so many areas that are flooding now due to overdevelopment and lack of infrastructure. You know, of course people were going to vote for that because they thought they were getting true flood control, but they didn't. Just so, also so you know, in 2004, Fort Worth passed another proposition for $232 million, and that was for supposed sewer improvements, but it was actually for Panther Island design. And then again in 2008, there was another $150 million that people voted for because it said it was for street improvements. So I wanted you to know that.
I would just follow up on what Clyde said about the programmatic review. That was initiated by Mayor Betsy Price, asking questions about the project. And she went to Washington, didn't receive any real assurances that the $500 million from the Corps was coming. I have talked with a congressman who's a friend of mine, and he says we have to divide the construction, office building, residential development from the flood control, and we can't keep them mixed together. We have to divide them up. And you heard John Cornyn when he was here, he basically said the same thing. We're now competing with the Ike Dike in Galveston Bay. We're competing with the post-Harvey work that needs to be done, work in Puerto Rico, all really legitimate flood control projects, legitimate Corps of Engineer projects. This thing gets mixed up with the office building development, and they look at it and they say, what's going on here? What's what we're trying to do to us here? So it needs to be divided up. The good news is that the bridges, even though it's taken forever, it looks like the bridges are going to be finished, and there's enough money to finish the bridges so we can get White Settlement open just down the street here, and get Main Street open, and get Main Street aligned right, and the same thing with Henderson. So it looks like that's going to happen. But the TIF, in order for the bonds to be issued, and Mary's right, there's provisions that the proceeds of the bonds are not going to just be used for flood control. They're going to be used for these little cute canals that have little rowboat docks in them in the island. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that bond proceeds. Bond proceeds are going to be used to put the utilities under these little cute canals that are in the Trinity in the Panther Island project. Not flood control. That's not flood control. That's just people walking around want to see a rowboat at a dock or something like that. So that's part of the bond project, and to bury the utilities to move them underneath those canals. That's a big part of it. And the city council has said we're not going to extend the TIF term from 40 to 50 years until this programmatic review comes back. And there's only one consulting company that's made the bid on the programmatic review. At one time, they were talking about putting it out for new bids and trying to get more participation. Now they're talking about, as Clyde indicated, they're talking about getting back with the one company that has bid it and trying to get them to change the scope and to lower their price. I would like to see, even though it's going to take more time, I'd like to make sure that we get really a good selection of consultants that rather than just relying on one consultant. I think we need to go back. And at one time, the meeting before last that I attended, they said, well, we're going to get David Owen, the purchasing director of TRWD, to go back to the people that were at the pre-bid meeting and find out why they didn't bid. That's disappeared. Nobody's said anything about that. No, there's been no discussion about that since the meeting before last, this past meeting. So Thank you.
We have some other hidden costs you may not be aware of too. The city used certificates of obligation, to my recollection, to build the new fire and police academy over on Felix, I guess it is, in the old the government property over there. And ordinarily, we don't use COs for projects like that. But they did it, I think, because it was expedient. They wanted to do it in a hurry so they could get the old building, get out of the old building for TRWD development, because I think there's supposed to be a channel goes through there someplace. And so they use COs. Well, COs are certificates of obligation, and those were intended by the legislature many years ago for small towns who couldn't afford a bond project to go ahead and build something like a fire station or a public building that was needed where they couldn't afford the bonds. But we've used COs before in this city where we shouldn't have in road construction. And the reason we're doing that is because we give away so damn much money on tax abatements and other tax deals for trying to bring new businesses here. When the Amazon was looking for a place to land in this area, J.D. Granger was quoted as saying, well, that's just exactly the kind of thing we want for the Panther Island project. But it is not what we wanted for the Panther Island project at all. It doesn't even come close to the original plan. But it was an expedient, and that's what everything is for, some kind of an expedient. They are not following the original plan. Obviously, they're not following the plan and cost, but every once in a while you'll hear Granger say, well, we're on target and we're on cost. It's a bump, total bump, because it's already years behind schedule, and the cost is 4 times what it was originally projected to be. There's no end to it, and we're just my own estimation is that it should be finish the bridges, put the roads in, and then can the rest of it let it go for private development or some other kind of process. It doesn't include public money. Yes, ma'am.
It was my understanding that when they, and I think you mentioned it, one of you did in the video, that the bridge, if they had gone with the TxDOT plan, which is like the 7th Street Bridge, then that would have been a lot less expensive, and it would have probably been done. But it was the, what's his name, JD, that said he wanted the other style or plan. Who in the Sam Hill made him in charge of everything? Wasn't there a committee or a board?
His mom.
Yeah, I had lunch with a former TxDOT board member last week, and he told me that he had a conversation about the bridges, that they could have been built in the same plant, in the same location where the 7th Street Bridge was, and we'd have 3 consistently designed, or 4 consistently designed bridges. I drive that 7th Street Bridge all the time, and it was not down for very long. I mean, they had that thing up. They made it off-site, and they put it in, but so for some reason, that's supposed to be better.
But I don't really, I know y'all say it is Kay's thing, but how in the heck does she have to say so over this? Who is his boss?
Jim Oliver is JD's direct boss, the executive director of the water district.
JD is on the water board payroll.
Right, yeah, all the TRVA, the Trinity River Vision Authority people are on the TRWD payroll. They're employees of the water district, although they talk about the TRVA, and they have TRVA meetings, but the TRVA, Trinity River Vision Authority, is intended to be an organization where the county, the city, and the water district can come together and have monthly meetings to try to coordinate things.
Sounds like a great shell game.
Yeah, that's a good term.
Oh, no problem. So, can you maybe talk to, you mentioned counties and who is going to be responsible for that. Can you maybe speak to what counties are affected by the water district and who can actually vote?
Only Tarrant County. Only part of Tarrant County. Only part of Tarrant. Just the people that are taxed by the water district can vote. And the theory is It's those people that are benefited from flood control. The counties that deal with the water district and cities that deal with the water district in the 7-county area, buying raw water from the water district, those people don't vote. That's a contractual transaction with.
Yeah, so they're effective, but they can't necessarily vote.
Yeah.
That's a good question. We'll come back to that.
This message is for, I'm sorry, sir, Clyde, I keep forgetting how to properly pronounce your name. I keep wanting to say Pite, but how did I pronounce it properly?
I'm sorry?
How do I pronounce your last name properly?
Peace.
Peach. Okay, I keep wanting to say Pite for some reason, I'm sorry.
Like a spell.
But you mentioned that, I want to come back to a question you said about the city having authority over this. So are you saying this day, the Fort Worth City Council still has authority over TRWD, and if they want to, they can get a hold of this problem?
No, they don't have authority over TRWD. TRWD is a separate entity. But what I was saying was that this project is a Fort Worth development project. This is all in Fort Worth. It's not a flood control. It's an economic development project. And when I questioned the commander of the Corps of Engineers of the district, I said, why are you doing this? Because it's not really flood control. He says, well, if we can help communities develop economically as well as doing some flood work, then we like to do it. They could have gotten the levees strengthened for $9 million back when we started talking about this thing. That was an option that the Corps of Engineers gave us. We could work on the levees and cost $9 million to make them 1,000-year flood-proof or something. I don't know exactly, but we didn't have to. This is not a flood control issue at all. In fact, when Jim Oliver said they were going to make a flood basin up in the Rockwood golf course area, going out that way towards the west, and somebody said, "Well, that's private property up there." And he says, "Well, if we have to, we'll take it by eminent domain." Well, there are two multimillionaires that have property up there who would have had it in court for the next 100 years because they weren't going to give their property up cheap. And so he gave that up and moved the flood ponds, these, what do you call them?
Basins. Basins.
Yeah, just storage, where if you have a flood, we'd have to gather up the water over in the Gateway Park area where they dug out oxbows. Because if we don't, having straightened out the channel, we increase the flow of water downstream, and we flood what? We flood Arlington and Dallas. Well, the Corps can't stop flooding here and cause flooding there, so we had another $170-some million for the original cost was just for digging out those oxbows and hauling away the dirt.
So what, if I can just say one more thing, what could the Fort Worth City Council do to stop this? It's still within their authority.
Well, the city council approved it, a $360 million project, and then they failed to maintain any supervision or surveillance of what's going on. This is a Fort Worth project. The Fort Worth City Council had a responsibility to know what was going on and to insist that the TRVA stay within their budget and at least create a budget. I don't think they even have a budget. They just spend money like it's going out of style. J.D. Granger's salary was $100,000 when he was hired in 2005. It's now $213,000. Somebody had a question.
Right here, actually.
In 2017, I was at one of the meetings for the Tarrant Regional Water District, and I was absolutely impressed with Mary's line of questioning. That particular day, the Corps of Engineers were there, as well as J.D. Granger, and you were this was 2017, and you repeatedly questioned the Corps of Engineers about the flood channel is built to specifications from 2004. And you went on and on about the upstream urbanization and how it would not be adequate today. Could you speak on that, Mary? Because that was a really well thought out question.
Thank you, Audra. This was an interesting moment. The Corps came in to tell us about levee safety, and I asked JD, I asked a general question, because what is necessary for a flood control project by the Corps of Engineers is a cost-benefit analysis. one was supposed to be done. And I asked the Corps why one wasn't done in this case. And basically what I was told was there was an exemption had been made in this case. And the exemption was made by Congress. So, and we all know who in Congress, right? So I asked JD, well, actually the Corps deferred to JD and had JD Granger come up to the podium to address it. So I asked him, who in Congress managed to get an exemption for this project? And he got a little angry and he said, Congress. I said, who specifically in Congress? And he again said, Congress, and all of Congress. And I said, isn't it true that it was your mother, Kay Granger, and he was mad. And he said, yes, that's my mother and I'm proud of her. And so that's the main reason why why we can't get any federal funding, because a cost benefit analysis was never done. So I don't think we will get any federal funding until one is done, and we all know that won't cut the mustard.
How many of you know what earmarks are? Okay, it's a sweetheart deal for a congressman that just wants to get a project done in their district. And earmarks were in place when I think this was originally proposed, the federal funding. Now earmarks are gone, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I think they should be gone. But there is hope among some people on the board that earmarks are going to come back, House, and the Republican-controlled Senate. The House can't just decide that earmarks are coming back on its own. So there is this outside hope that earmarks are coming back, and this thing will just sail right on through because it's an earmark. I personally believe that's wishful thinking, and it's not going to happen.
All right, question in the back.
Would any of you guys like to speculate on what the audit is going to show? And I'm not talking about how much money is being spent. I'm talking about what is being spent on, if indeed it's an audit at all.
It's not an audit. It's a programmatic. It's called a comprehensive programmatic review, not to be confused with a financial audit. And let me tell you, when you attend these board meetings and the auditor, independent auditors, Deloitte gets up and talks about how everything looks okay. All of the status quo people want to say, well, we're fine. Our auditors say everything's good. That's not what this is about. This is actually, hopefully, we'll look at the entire organization, the entire structure. It won't be so much financially oriented as it will be organizationally oriented, I think. And look at the program and see. They've got all kinds of audited financials, and I don't think anybody's in anybody's pocket at this point. I don't know. I mean, but I'm not accusing anybody of stealing any money because but the audits are clean. They are clean. Although, if you look at the analysis on the TIF that was just recently given, they say if this federal money doesn't come in, we've got some problems. And I sent an email out to a lot of people that talked about the contingencies on the TIF and the problems they're going to have if the federal money doesn't come in. Sorry to dominate things here.
Question right here.
Okay, my husband and I went to a meeting at the Water Board recently, the last couple of months, and they were doing a report on the used to be TRWD, Trinity Uptown, and now it's Panther Island. I don't know why they keep changing the name, because it's the same project, but my husband counted how many times in that report they said flood control. It is not a flood control project, but they said it 75 times in that report, and not one day. So it's ridiculous that they're just trying to think, if we hear it often enough, maybe we'll believe it, but we don't. So hang in there, Mary. We need you bad.
All right, perfect. We have a question over here.
Let me just briefly address that, Mrs. Hawes, because there was when the TIF was TIF number 9, I guess this is the Trinity River TIF. in the explanation of that TIF, written by the Water District when it was being drafted up, they said that this was to support economic development and a flood control component caused by the economic development. I mean, that's right out of their website.
Yeah, and I want to respond to your thoughts about what can the city do. The city can slow this project down by refusing to extend the TIF term from 40 to 50 years. And they're going to be called upon to do that after the program review comes back. Do you agree with that?
They can stop it.
They can slow down the TIF. Now, what's being talked about now by the Water District, the CFO mentioned, who is married to the bond counsel, but so the CFO mentioned that they could issue commercial paper, which is certificates of obligation, like I said, it's short-term debt, but that's what the problem is. They're using short-term debt to deal with long-term projects, you know, and it would be inappropriate for them to issue commercial paper because they can't get the bond proceeds, but they're talking about doing that now.
Clyde? Push right here. Clyde, the question I've got is about the TIF, and I think you just hit on it. The TIF is the key to really throw the monkey wrench into it, absolutely makes the wheels come off of that deal. The other night in the meeting of the Southwest Republican Club, the Fort Worth Council of Governments was there, and I asked him, I said, who are the members of the TIF? Who are your people on the TIF? And how long have they been on it? Especially the executive of the TIF. He says it's the same ones that started out. They've been there the whole time and they've never been changed out. To me, that's problem number one, because they've been there, 11 years, 12 years, something of that nature. And being a former councilman in the city of Benbrook and being the chief of the TIF district that we have there and understanding the mechanics of it and to it, is you have a lot of authority of how that money is going to be done. You do not have to spend it. It is not a requirement to be spent. So everything in that TIF can stay there, let the TIF die, send it back to the taxpayers for what it was originally intended for anyway, because you've got other things that are involved with it too that are giving up money, like I believe the JPS is involved in it. I don't think the school system is, but and the county's involved with it. So your county is being deferred with tax money also that's putting into this thing.
County commissioners have to vote on this TIF extension as well.
Yes. So there's some moving parts in there that there is a lot of leverage that if somebody really wants to move it, they can put a grinding halt to the entire thing. But it requires some backbone, somebody, the city council, the mayor, standing up and advising the TIF or holding the TIF accountable. And if the TIF board's not going to do it right, replace them. I mean, they're notorious for replacing boards like they did for the Fort Worth Transportation Authority. I mean, so it's not a new thing to them.
Yeah, the TIF could be dissolved by the city council. They created it, it is a city entity. Back in 2005, when this thing had gone from 360 million to 435 million, there was a very good spread in the Star Telegram about who was paid what. And then they were estimating that the TIF would pay $64 million. Well, the TIF was already on the hook for $350 million, roughly. They are guaranteeing $320 million back to be paid back to the water district. If the water district uses their funds for part of the development, then the TIF will pay the water district back. So there's been a lot of shuffling of money around, and it's almost like a shell game. You don't know which shell the money is under.
So does the water authority, the Tarrant Regional Water Authority, have an agreement with the TIF to do stuff? Is that what it is? They have a trying to figure out the name for it, but
I don't know how.
almost like a
I'm
developer's
not sure.
agreement.
I can't say for sure what the structure is.
It's like a
with the
developer's
TIF and the
agreement.
water district. I don't know.
If anybody wants to leave me your card, I have a copy of the TIF analysis report that I mentioned to you that just was recently presented. to both the TRVA board and the TRWD board, and I'll be happy to email a copy of it to you. So.
Question in the front.
Another elephant in the room. What about the heavy metal contamination problem in the substrate there?
Would you repeat that?
The heavy metal contamination problem. There's going to be some costs involved there, and nobody knows what that is.
Well, it was originally estimated it would take $20 million to remediate all the contaminated areas that the water district or the Trinity River Division would be dealing with. At one time, they said that they would not be doing any of the canal work at all, that would be left up to developers, which means it wouldn't get done because no developer in his right mind is going to go digging channels through the area where American Cyanamid was, or over by Texas Electric either. But the $20 million was about good enough for maybe one property when they started digging up dirt and what have you. And then I think in the 2005 estimate, it was up to around 40 million. I don't know what they spent on abating the contamination by now. It's an awful lot.
Maybe they'll get an exception.
It's like most of this stuff. Nobody knew what they were doing.
So I remember this from the last election, and I'm not sure, do they still have their own helicopter that they use and a deer lease and all these sort of things? If you guys get elected, do you think they'll get you have a ride this time around?
I'm glad to never ride in a helicopter.
There we go. All right, fantastic.
Push you out.
Well, personally, I think the helicopter is not
Or they land
what it was advertised back in an election some years ago. It's not a Bell Jet Ranger or anything like that. It's one of those little $200,000 helicopters, but $400,000 maybe. But my idea, if I were on the board, would say let's use drones to check the dikes. That's all they use it for, is to check the dikes and haul people around to fix stuff.
All right, so what are the important dates that we need to know for the election?
May 4th.
May 4th? And last day to register to vote is 30 days before that, I believe. Is there a question?
I'm ready.
After listening to all this stuff, I just wondered, what's the final answer? Is there one, or should they just disassemble everything, bury it, and be done with it?
Super collider.
Well, when Councilman Zimmerman was still in office,
look at it.
he said, well, the ship has already left port. Well, yeah, but I don't buy that. You know, I am not in favor of spending $1 billion to save 500 million. That's not good economic sense. I mean, there has to be a point where you say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to finish the roads. We're going to leave a certain part of it for development to work in that area, what have you, and then cut off public funding for it and leave it for private development.
That bridge right there might make a great skate park. They could use it for that.
The bottom line is we need elected officials who are willing to truly represent the people and make the hard decisions.
That was my question. If the two of you got on the board, would it be possible for you working together to get things done?
Yeah, there are two people on the board that are reform-minded now. They're always in a 2-3 minority. But James Hill and Leah King have hearts in the right place.
Okay, so there'd be 4 of you,
Right.
and there'd be 3.
It'd be one. It'd be Jack Stevens, the only. If we're elected,
He's a lifer, isn't he?
well, I don't know. I think if he found himself in the minority, I think Jack might move on, might retire.
He's been scooched over by the good old boys club.
Well, but I mean, if he's in a 4-1 minority all the time, I've had lunch with him, and I would say that he might retire. Might, okay? So.
Don't trust him.
Okay.
If I get on there, do you mind?
That's job. So there's 5 total, right? And the structure of it is the elections alternate every 2 years. It's 3 people and then 2 people, 3 people, unless they change when the election happens, which I guess they did that once before. Yeah, they did that last
So
time.
that would be 4 of you that could fight some of this.
Right. All right, question in the middle?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, it appears to me that the Trinity Water District's leaving its scope of what it was designed to do, which is water and flooding. I'm just curious, technology is great. I just went and looked at the entire budget for the Trinity Water District the last 4 years, and I scrolled quickly through. In 2014, they had economic development as listed in their budget. After that, they're really trying to hide those numbers. How much of the Trinity River Water District budget is going to economic development, and how much is going to what their scope of work is?
Yeah. I have a report that shows all that, and I wish I brought it with me. I haven't memorized the numbers, but I have that report. And I will say, if you give me your email, if you give me the recent quarterly report for TRWD just came out, and it has those numbers in there. And I'll be happy to email that to you as well if you'll send me give me your email address. Oh, sorry.
Question on the side?
Okay, Mary, is it true that I have heard, and I thought it was confirmed, but you probably can confirm it for us all, that the water board, I know personally, because I got records finally after 3 months of waiting instead of 11 days from them, showing where all they had gas wells on water board properties. And it was amazing. And there's so many around the lake within 1,000 foot that should not be, because I've seen the one below us when it was there before we finally fussed enough and got it out, before they put 12 more right there, right on the edge of the water, less than 200 foot. But they have all that money. This is millions and millions and millions of dollars every year from their proceeds from the gas wells, whether it be their initial money for allowing the gas well to put on their property, not counting the royalties. And they had just enormous amounts of hundreds of millions of dollars. And they voted, from what I understand, themselves to not have to use that for their mission, which is supposed to be appropriating and flood control, appropriating good water for people to drink and flood control, but they themselves voted to not have to use that hundreds of millions of dollars for that in any way, so that they can do whatever they want. Like,
You are correct.
so I am correct that is true. Thank you.
So what happened? Can you rephrase the question? Or
Can you rephrase the question and maybe kind of give your spin on it, Mary?
In my opinion, that was one of the things that spurred some of their diversion from their true mission of flood control and water supply. I think they started making more money than God when it came to the gas well royalties and et cetera. And I think that set the ball in motion. And when when the royalties stopped coming in like they did, now they're really in a bind. And in return, the taxpayers are in a bind now. So I think with the reduced gas royalties, I think that really set this ball in motion. If that makes sense.
Fair question. Well, I think anybody looking in from the outside thinking that it started with a $9 million levy project and now has blown up to $1.2 billion potentially, I think anybody will say that it is a mess and it needs people to come in and take care of it. So maybe if you want to comment, is there hope? Do we have hope that we can pull this off? If we get you guys in?
We can do it.
All right.
I think the main thing is we've got to get the bridges finished. I mean, that's really important. I've got friends that own businesses along White Settlement, and it's really impacted them. So we need to get the bridges finished. That's got to happen. So, there's money that can be done. There's money to do that.
Bridges from where to where? Those are? Over the dirt?
I forgot to add earlier, I talked about aquifer storage recovery. And I'm pleased to report that there is one going in, a pilot project going in by the Trinity River Authority on Trinity Boulevard. And it's going to be very deep, and it's going to hold billions of gallons of water. So I'm very, very excited.
Which aquifer is it going in? Which aquifer is it going into? The Biloxi or the Trinity?
It's 1,000 feet down. I can't recall the name of the one that's down.
What's the Biloxi?
No,
It's an empty one.
No,
I'll
there's
look on
two
my
of
phone
them.
afterwards. I can't remember the name of it off my head.
I gotta tell something that happened at the board meeting, not this past one, but there was discussion about the Trinity Aquifer, and I'll just say, somebody that's been around there a long time asked the question of the person that was at the podium, is the aquifer below the river or above the river? This person's been around there for around about 8 years, so that's kind of what we're dealing with.
Okay.
I thought to myself, if it was above the river, it would be an aquifer.
Well, it's over his head. It's over his head.
Well, I think I don't think we could exhaust all of the questions. I think everybody has questions about this, but I think it's probably about time to wrap. Clyde, I'll give you a minute if you want to have closing comments, same for y'all, and then make sure as we're going down the line here, if you want to have people engage with you in your campaign, make sure to tell us how to do that. Clyde, we'll let you start.
I'd just like to make one point. That is, we have two people, Jim Lane and Marty Leonard, that are up for re-election. They have both filed for re-election. The top two vote getters are going to win the election for the water board. So you need to vote for two people. Don't vote for either of those incumbents. Vote for Mary Kelleher first, Gary Miller second.
I don't care, as long as I'm one of them, I don't gotta be there.
I just want to say thank you for being so supportive of me. It's difficult for me to get up and talk before people sometimes, but I appreciate all the support. I just want you to know too that I'm having a fundraiser on my birthday, April 2nd. It's going to be at Cooper's Barbecue, and of course y'all are all welcome. And thanks again.
This is my birthday. I'm 72 years old today, so.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
We can make it a fundraiser. I have envelopes, so. I appreciate your attention, and it's a very important election, and it's got my interest because of what I do for a living. I mean, I deal with these kind of issues in real estate development work. This one is bigger than it. I've never dealt with a $1.1 billion project, but the principles are the same. And you know, there's been some mistakes made. If I had to go back 14 years ago, I would have said, don't even talk about a real estate development. If you wanted to put a flood control project in, let the Corps do that. Don't even talk about a real estate development. That'll come. That'll happen naturally. And you don't need to put a ground floor display in the Star Telegram building on the corner of 7th and Throckmorton.
I remember that.
You don't have to do that. You do not have to do that. Or if you did, wait till the water's in the ditch before you did it, you know? Because it's really messing things up, having the real estate development and the flood control tied together. So watch the video of Senator Cornyn on Channel 5. Do a search for Panther Island, John Cornyn, and you'll find what he has to say about it. And basically he's saying it doesn't look like the interests of the community are being served by this project as far as flood control is concerned. I'm going to say one more thing. Yes.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but remember, this started at $360 million. 2 years later, it was $435 million. 2 years later, it was 700 and some million. 2009 was 908 million. This last year was 1.16 billion. We're not done. We're not done. Back in 2006, I ran for the water board. I said it was going to be over $1 billion when it's done. And I said $1 billion to $1.5 billion. We are not through spending because they can't finish it with $1.16 billion. They're going to take $1.5 billion and we're not going to get our money back.
Sounds like California, $77 billion they flushed in the toilet down there. All right, one last question.
Just one more question on the election itself. Those of us who may not, like I'm in Grapevine, I'm not in the district, I can't do that. Where can we find out visually where our friends are who live in the district?
I'm going to plug for my website.
Okay.
My website is Vote for Votes, not the number 4, but VOTEFORMOATES. And there's a link on there that has the map on it.
So we can find out where
Yes,
our friends are
Yes,
who are in the district.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, and these elections are such a low turnout election. Getting your friends out to vote would be huge.
Yeah.
Would be huge. And we're all going to be watching the mail-in ballots as well. So.